At the end of last year, we left our home in Devon to embark on an incredible adventure. Driving through France, we hugged the coastline before crossing into Spain. From there, we followed the west coast of Portugal, discovering breathtaking beaches and charming towns. Looping back into Spain, we continued our journey before making our way home through France. In this video, I'll be breaking down the total cost of this incredible trip and showing exactly what it took to make this adventure a reality.
Hello, welcome back to another episode. This one is going to be a little bit boring and I'm really sorry if this bores you, but I'm going to be talking about the cost of our travels. So that's from when we left our home on the 22nd of November and arrived back here in the UK on the 23rd of December. So it was just over 4 weeks. I think it was like 4 weeks and 2 days. And I'm just going to do a breakdown of every single cost and how much everything costs. So to start, let me just move this over so you're... Oh. So to start, we spent £1,273.36 on fuel. Now, fuel is one of those things that you have to pay for. Like, it's unavoidable. You can't, like, if you want to drive down to Spain, into Portugal, and then back into Spain and all the way around, that you can't avoid paying for fuel. Like, it's just something you have to pay for. And it's the prices are different everywhere you go. So even the north of Spain is more expensive than the south of Spain. France is a lot more expensive than Spain in general, and then you cross from Spain into Portugal and then it's even more expensive. And I think Portugal, when I was doing some research, was one of the most expensive places in Europe to buy fuel. So yeah, that was definitely interesting. And I'm just going to show you a little video of when we were in Portugal. So before we crossed from Spain into Portugal, we filled the van up. And in Spain, fuel is about £1.30 a litre. In Portugal, it's £1.60 a litre. So then when we crossed from Spain into Gibraltar, fuel was like £1.04 a litre. It was so cheap. It was insanely cheap. So we have just come into Gibraltar and we have come to the Casper fuel station, where 60 litres of fuel was £61. And obviously, because we're in Gibraltar, it's pounds. So that is the cheapest tank of fuel I think this van has ever had, and will probably ever have. And the price per litre was £1.04 a litre. So we managed to get some cheap fuel there, and then when we got back into the south of Spain, fuel wasn't too bad. It's when we got back into France, that's when it got expensive. And obviously in France, whilst we went through France, we were driving all the way through to get to the ferry. So we were spending like a tank of fuel a day nearly. Number two, the second most expensive part of our trip was groceries. We spent £571.98 on groceries, and that was just groceries. That doesn't include eating out. So that was literally only just going to shops like Lidl or Carrefour, and my favourite one was Mercadona. Like, I just loved Mercadona, and that's probably why we spent so much. I'm in Mercadona, and I've waited a whole year for this. But I mean, for 4 weeks, I don't think that's too expensive, considering we're in the van, and in the van we don't often take time to like prepare meals. It's kind of just like quick and easy food. So yeah, I think if we had more freezer space, it would have been a lot cheaper. But the problem with the van is we've only got a small freezer, so we can't buy that much food. So we can only buy mostly fresh food, which then only lasts a couple of days. So then you end up spending more because you're constantly in the supermarket. I don't really like cooking in the van, like, to be honest. So I don't mind putting stuff in the oven and stuff in the microwave, but the thought of making a fry up in your bedroom and your living room, yeah, it's just, yeah, I just can't do it. Like, everything would just stink of like egg and bacon, and no, definitely not. So yeah, we spent £571 on groceries. I don't know if that's a lot, but some people are probably thinking, how much? But for 4.5 weeks, yeah, I think we did pretty well. Our third biggest expenditure was campsites. We spent £294.49 on campsites. So most campsites we stayed in were between 10 and 15 euros. I think there was like one or two that we spent maybe 17, 18 euros, but it was very rare. Like if a campsite was that expensive, it was because it was an amazing campsite. So in the UK, the average campsite is probably maybe £15 a night if you're lucky. And that's out of season. Like in the height of season, you can end up spending like £40 just a night for a pitch. And then obviously all the charges that come with that, like electricity. When you're in Europe, because we've done it before, but we didn't spend that much time in campsites, I was a bit unsure how this trip was going to plan out, whether we'd do more wild camping or more campsites. But I think we only wild camped probably 10 nights maybe out of, no, maybe probably about 7 actually. So we probably only wild camped about 7 nights. So probably a week over the whole 4 weeks. Because campsites were so cheap. So like for €10 a night, we were getting like electricity, water, showers. And I think the biggest thing was the peace of mind, being able to leave the van and not have to worry about, is it going to get broken into, or are we going to get a fine? Are we going to get moved on? And Portugal now is very strict. So Portugal has new laws where if you get caught camping along any part of the coast or any natural parks, it's a £600 fine. So we did not want a £600 fine. Luckily, they just move you on. So if they catch you once, they'll move you on. And then if they catch you again, you'll get a £600 fine. So yeah, I think if anyone's planning on going to Portugal, yeah, just bear that in mind. But campsites are also so cheap because the Portuguese government have realised that there are so many campervans and motorhomes. So a lot of the time there's designated places in towns, and a lot of the time they're free. And if they're not free, they're very cheap. So yeah, that's definitely something to consider. It's Monday the 2nd of December and we are in a town called Praia de Viria, and there's a free air just outside the town, so we stayed here last night. And we stayed in some amazing campsites. Like some of the campsites we stayed in, we were paying €10 a night and it was right on the beach. And then some of the free ones we stayed in were right on the beach as well. So yeah, it's definitely, I personally would recommend staying in airs or campsites. It depends how long you're going for. If you're going for months and you're on a budget, then maybe try and like break it up a little bit. But yeah, we were both very happy to just arrive at a campsite, get our chairs out, relax in the sun, and not have to worry about being moved on. Our fourth biggest expenditure was eating out. So we spent £250.73 on eating out. So that includes like bakeries, patisseries, anything that isn't a supermarket. So this will be our last French boulangerie. It's a very sad moment.
And a chocolate top.
Look at all these delicious goodies. And then we also ate out of our friend Brian, I think twice when we stayed with him. So we stayed with him for 2 nights, ate out with him twice, and then we paid the bill. So we ended up paying for like 3 people rather than 2. So yeah, we didn't eat out that often, to be honest. I think there was like a couple of nights. And sometimes we'd be driving along and we'd see like a Burger King or a McDonald's and we'd be like, oh, let's just quickly grab something. So we could have spent a lot more. Our 5th expenditure was tolls. We spent, drumroll please, £103.21 on tolls. Now, tolls, don't even get me started on tolls. So we went to France last September in our car and we drove about 10 miles on a toll and we were charged €50 to drive about 10 miles. So there was definitely a mistake. So after that, we decided we'd avoid tolls, which was pretty easy, to be fair. Like driving through France, it's easy to avoid the tolls and it doesn't add that much time. And then we got into the north of Spain and there weren't really any tolls. The only toll road was from San Sebastian to Santander, which is definitely worth doing because if you don't do that toll, you will end up in the mountains. So we took that toll and that toll wasn't very expensive. I think the Spanish tolls are a lot cheaper than the French tolls. It was when we got into Portugal that there are so many tolls that it's almost impossible to avoid. So what we did was we looked online and we decided to pay for like a toll tag and it lasted for 3 days. So we got into Portugal and I thought, we'll pay for this toll tag. It was €20, and you can use the tolls for a limited amount for 3 days. And I was like, oh, that sounds brilliant. Like, within 3 days, we'll be in the south of Portugal. Anyway, it turns out that after we'd paid for this toll tag, thinking that we'd get all of the tolls for free, that €20 was only for the tolls that were monitored with the number plate recognition things. So there were so many toll booths all along the way that you had to physically pay for, and they weren't the toll tags like we thought. So we'd spent €20 on tolls, and I don't think we actually went onto one toll that had a toll tag. So I think the thing with Portugal is either use the tolls and accept you have to pay, or just avoid the tolls altogether, which in the end that's what we ended up doing, because we were driving along, and as you drive along the motorway, it's not like one barrier. You drive along and there's a barrier, and then you drive a little bit further, there's another barrier, and then another barrier, and every time you have to pay, and it's all the way along the motorway. So like, yeah, it ended up getting expensive. So I was so confused because we had paid €20 thinking like, oh, we can go on all the tolls, and then turns out that most of the Vanlife tolls are in the south of Portugal. So if I would do it again, I would just avoid all the tolls, to be honest, because yes, it saves time using the toll roads, but you end up spending so much money. So we ended up spending £100 on tolls, and that, I mean, that was only in 4 weeks, but that's £100 we didn't need to spend. But then you have to be careful, because there are times, like in the north of Spain, where if you do avoid the toll will take an hour, and then if you avoid it, you'll end up driving 2 hours. So actually it's more cost effective to use the tolls. So I think definitely do some research before you travel, and just try and work out if it's cheaper to use the tolls or not use the tolls. And it depends how pushed you are for time. So like coming back, we used some of the tolls in France just because we were so pushed for time, and it was going to add hours if we didn't use the tolls. So yeah, definitely do research. But I would say in Portugal, avoid the tolls, hit the coast, and just follow the road down or up, whichever way you're going. And yeah, you'll definitely see more of Portugal by not using the tolls. And I think it also depends on what vehicle you're in. So in a van, obviously it's easy to avoid tolls because it doesn't really matter where you end up. But if you're driving a big motorhome or an A-class motorhome, then yeah, you definitely have to do research and consider it's probably not worth the stress of driving through little towns. But yeah, I think I personally, if you're in a van and you're not strapped for time, avoid all the tolls. And the final thing, the sixth and final thing, last but not least, we spent £168.51, and that was on just random things that I can't actually pinpoint. So it was things like laundry. So we probably spent about £10 £10 a week on laundry when we were doing like washing and drying. This is one of the best parts of van life. Laundry.
That's the bit I want to show you on Instagram.
Lingerie. We spent money on gas, so putting gas in the van. I can't actually pinpoint how much we'd spent on gas because it was so sporadic. But in the south of Portugal and in the south of Spain, we didn't use that much gas at all because we weren't using the heating, and obviously our heating's powered by gas, so we saved a lot of money there. So I think we put gas in like the north of Spain and then didn't fill it up again until we got to France. We also spent money in shops called China Bazaar, which are China shops, so it's just everything from China. So like dog toys, I think we bought like a washing line, clothing pegs. You honestly cannot move. So yeah, we spent £168.51 just on random bits that obviously I can't pinpoint because they're not groceries and they're not eating out, they're just things for the dog. I think we bought the dog a new bed as well. That was like €6. So anyway, without further ado, let's get to the total. So for four whole weeks in Europe, so we're talking France, Spain, Portugal, Spain, France. So we did a big loop, and I'll put it on here so you can see. It was £2,662.28. So if you divide that by 4, we spent £665.57 a week. And then if you divide that by 7, so obviously there's 7 days in a week, we spent £95.80 per day. I would always say budget for about £100 a day, and obviously you might go over, you might go under, and it all depends how much you're moving, how much fuel you're paying for, how much time you've got. But yeah, I'd always just budget for about £100 a day, because you still have to consider, you have to pay for fuel, you need 3 meals a day, you have obviously, like, you eat out, you have to pay for campsites and like other things that you don't expect, like tolls, and then yeah, any bits of shopping that you do. So I would always just say £100 a day is like, yeah, just budget for that. So if you're going away, just work out how many days you're going for, and then £100 a day, and then times that by how many days. So yeah, we spent £95.80 a day, which I think, yeah, was pretty good. It sounds a lot, £2,662.28. It sounds a lot, but when you break it down, it isn't actually that much at all. And I think we weren't really on a budget, so we didn't go thinking like, oh, we need to try and save as much money as possible. We went, and if we wanted things, we bought things, and if we wanted to eat out, we ate out. So yeah, I wouldn't say we skimped. You could definitely do it cheaper. Like, there's like 100% guarantee you could definitely do it cheaper, but you also have to consider it's something you don't do very often, so you want to enjoy it. You don't want to be driving along and think, oh, let's not stay in a campsite, like, or oh, let's sit here for 3 days because we don't want to have to pay for fuel. So yeah, just go and enjoy it, and just expect that it will be about £100 a day. So one thing that I haven't added that is worth considering only if you're traveling with a pet is coming back from France. We had to get Buddy a worming tablet, and it has to be administered by a vet, so you have to find a vet 24 hours before you travel, and no more than 5 days. So you have this window where you have to get it done, and if you get it done after the 24 hours before you travel, the worming tablet might not be effective, and if you get it done before that, it might not be effective. So yeah, they give you this window, and obviously we traveled on a Monday, so it wasn't until we woke up on the Friday that we realised the vets would have been closed over the weekend. We had to get it done that day. So luckily we managed to find a vet, and vets in Europe are very cheap and they're amazing. So yeah, it definitely wasn't a concern, because I think when we first did it, it was quite a big concern. We were thinking like, how much is this going to cost? What are the vets going to be like? But yeah, the vets are all really friendly. A lot of them speak English. That's just one last thing to consider if you're traveling with a pet. If you're not traveling with a pet, then obviously you don't need to consider it, which is why I haven't added it onto our expenses, because yeah, that's just, it's not really for everyone to consider. It's just if you have a pet. Also, another thing to consider if you have a pet, you obviously have to get a health certificate before you travel, which will be administered by your vet as well. And yeah, they'll do like a rabies injection or like a thing through the nose. And most vets charge £250, and that is only valid once, so you can only use it once. So you will get that from your vets, you'll pay them £250, and then you can only travel to Europe once. And that's because of Brexit, so it used to be a lot easier. We're very fortunate that Buddy has a French passport, so we don't have to worry about any of that, and he obviously got his rabies done in France, so that lasts, well, they say it lasts for 3 years, but obviously we'd get that done every year, because yeah, I don't think it would last 3 years in his system, and we obviously don't want him to get rabies. So yeah, if you're traveling with a pet, definitely consider that. I just want to say thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I also want to say thank you to everyone for following our journey. When I started this channel, I did not think that anyone would even watch it, so yeah, it's amazing. And if you're considering driving down to Europe, that's like anywhere, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, if you're planning on doing it, like, don't even think about it, just do it. If you're thinking, oh, shouldn't we, like, yeah, I just think book a ferry. I always recommend DFDS because they are the cheapest, and a lot of the time it's no thrills, but yeah, you get what you pay for.